Okay, so um, today we're going deep diving into the life of St. Catherine of Siena and using the Rest is History podcast as our guide.
Yeah,
And
that's good.
I think maybe a good place to start would be just to paint a picture of the world that Catherine was born into.
Okay.
She was born in 1347,
Right.
and Europe at that time was facing a lot of hardship.
Yeah, it was
Right.
a time of immense upheaval.
Yeah, the Black Death had just decimated the population.
Yeah, the Black Death, the Hundred Years' War was raging.
Right?
And even the papacy was in exile in Avignon,
Oh, wow.
which is a period known as the Babylonian captivity.
The Babylonian captivity.
Yeah.
So what caused that?
Well, essentially, the French king at the time exerted considerable influence over the papacy, and that led to the Pope's relocation to Avignon.
So like he forced.
Pretty much, yeah. It was a
Yeah.
very controversial move,
Right.
with many seeing it as a sign of the church's corruption
Oh, wow.
and a blow to its authority.
That's huge.
Yeah, it was a big deal.
So the church, which, was like the bedrock of medieval society,
Exactly.
was kind of facing a crisis of legitimacy.
Yeah. It's no wonder that people were looking for guidance and signs of divine intervention.
Right.
And that's where Catherine's story comes in.
Right.
She was born in Siena, which was this wealthy Italian republic known for its devotion to the Virgin Mary.
Oh, interesting. So it's interesting that they were so devoted to the Virgin Mary, and yet
Yeah.
the papacy was in such a state.
Yeah, and Siena really stood out, as a beacon of prosperity and faith.
Yeah.
Amidst the turmoil
Right?
gripping Europe. The city was flourishing economically. It was fueled by its wool manufacturing and banking industries.
Yeah.
And its people were undertaking ambitious projects like the expansion of their cathedral,
Wow.
which, was a testament to their devotion.
Yeah. So we've got this backdrop of despair, but also this like real fervent faith.
Yeah.
So what was Catherine's early life like?
Well, she was one of 25 children.
25 children.
25 children. Wow.
Yeah, you can imagine that household.
That's a lot of siblings.
Her mother was known for her fertility,
Wow.
described by her biographer as fruitful bee.
Oh my gosh.
But sadly, Catherine's twin sister died shortly after birth,
Oh.
a loss that seems to have had a profound impact on her.
Yeah. Losing a twin, especially at such a young age, must have been incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
You wonder how that shapes a person's worldview.
Yeah, and it certainly seems to have influenced Catherine's spiritual journey.
Okay.
But despite that tragedy, she was actually known for her cheerful disposition in her early years.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Nicknamed Euphrosyne, meaning joy in Greek.
Oh, wow.
She was a lively child who loved exploring the streets of Siena with her brothers.
So like a pretty normal childhood, it sounds like.
Yeah, amidst this large devout family.
So when do we see the first hints of her extraordinary path?
Well, the shift seems to begin around the age of 6 when Catherine started having visions of Christ.
Visions of Christ.
Imagine that.
This young girl suddenly seeing Christ enthroned in glory.
Wow.
It was a pivotal moment that ignited a longing for the spiritual life within her.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah.
How did her family react to that?
Well, this is where things get a little complicated.
Okay.
Catherine's older sister, Bonaventura, sadly died in childbirth.
Oh, no.
And their parents, perhaps hoping to fill the void, wanted Catherine to marry Bonaventura's widower.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure.
For a young girl,
Absolutely.
especially after losing her sister.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, coupled with her visions and her growing desire to dedicate herself to God, led her down this path of rebellion against societal norms.
So she rejects everything.
She rejects everything her parents planned
Oh.
and embraces a life of asceticism.
And what does that actually look like?
So asceticism, that's extreme self-denial
Right.
and discipline. So she started with small acts of self-denial, like giving up meat.
Okay.
But soon she began to starve herself, wearing a chain around her waist so tight that it would dig into her flesh.
Oh, my gosh.
And she even cut off her hair, rejecting the trappings of femininity.
That's intense.
Yeah, it was extreme behavior,
Yeah.
even for the time.
Really?
Her confessor, Raymond of Capua, attributed her behavior to the devil tempting her with impure thoughts and images,
Yeah.
which she fought off through self-denial.
It's interesting how they explained it through that lens.
Yeah.
But, from a modern perspective, you can't help but wonder if there was something else going on there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Looking back, it's hard to ignore the possibility of what we might recognize today as anorexia nervosa.
Yeah.
Her extreme fasting, self-induced vomiting, and the psychological distress she experienced all point to a more complicated picture.
Right.
Yeah,
It's fascinating how interpretations change across time periods.
yeah.
But at the time, her actions really solidified her image as this holy woman,
Exactly.
especially her fasting. So
Yeah.
why did that resonate so strongly?
Well, remember, this was a time of widespread famine
Right.
following the Black Death.
Yeah.
Food scarcity was a constant threat, and fasting was already seen as this highly valued form of religious devotion,
Right.
a way to demonstrate piety and purify the soul.
So in a way, her fasting became like a powerful symbol
Exactly.
of sacrifice and spiritual strength.
In a world consumed by hunger and death.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did her parents ever come around?
They did. They realized that they couldn't force her into a conventional life.
Right.
So with their acceptance, she joined the Dominicans.
The Dominicans.
Which was a Catholic religious order.
Oh, okay.
As a lay sister.
And remind me what a lay sister is.
So unlike nuns who lived in cloistered communities,
Okay.
lay sisters were dedicated to serving the poor and sick within their community.
Okay.
But they still adhered to a life of prayer and piety.
Right.
So she's fully committed to this life of service.
But you mentioned earlier that she claimed to be married to Christ.
Oh, yes.
So that's where things get even more intriguing.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
Well, her visions continued,
Oh,
and Christ began appearing to her regularly, often depicted in graphic detail, nailed to the cross, covered in blood.
wow.
Very intense visions.
Wow.
But according to Raymond of Capua, these visions weren't just fleeting images.
Okay.
They were intimate conversations.
Oh, wow.
He even describes Christ and Katherine walking up and down her room reciting psalms together.
Oh, my God.
It's a very strange and fascinating juxtaposition, the divine and the everyday.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how does this lead to the marriage?
Well, it culminates in this mystical marriage ceremony that took place right there in her room.
In her room.
Yeah.
Who else was there?
So according to Raymond, it was a grand affair, even if it was only in Catherine's mind.
Okay.
King David was there playing music.
Really?
St. Paul acted as a witness.
Wow.
And of course, the Virgin Mary led Catherine to Christ.
Oh.
And then in a rather unexpected twist, Christ takes Catherine's hand and places his foreskin on her finger as a wedding ring.
His foreskin? That's not your typical wedding ring.
No, it's not.
But I guess in 14th century Europe.
Well, remember, relics, objects associated with saints or biblical figures
Right.
held immense religious significance at the time.
So I can see how that would be considered sacred.
Yeah,
Even if it seems a little odd to us today.
exactly.
Does anyone challenge this?
Of course,
Yeah.
skeptics dismissed her as a witch or a fraud,
Yeah.
while others just couldn't comprehend the idea of a mystical marriage.
Yeah.
Even within the church, there were debates about the nature and legitimacy of such claims.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, regardless of what people thought,
Yeah.
this marriage to Christ, real or perceived,
Yeah.
really had an impact on her actions going forward.
Absolutely.
Right.
It empowered her in a profound way.
Okay.
This marriage wasn't just a personal spiritual experience.
Right.
It was seen as a sign of divine favor,
Okay.
granting her a unique authority to act on Christ's behalf.
So from a life of private piety,
Yes.
she moves towards a more public role.
Exactly. She felt this responsibility to share her experiences and teachings with the world, driven by what she believed were Christ's instructions.
Wow.
And with this newfound confidence,
Okay.
she began to perform miracles, heal the sick,
Right.
and even intervene in political affairs.
Miracles in politics.
Yeah.
This is where Catherine's story really takes off.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exciting.
All right. Well, let's pick that up next time.
Sounds good. Catherine's story really takes a dramatic turn here as she steps onto the public stage,
Yeah.
driven by her convictions and this perceived connection to the divine.
You mentioned that she started performing miracles.
Yeah.
So what were some of the notable ones?
Well, healing the sick was a common one for holy figures at the time,
Right.
but Catherine had a particular reputation for restoring milk to the breasts of mothers who had dried up.
That's quite specific.
It is.
And I imagine at a time when infant mortality rates were so high
Extremely high.
that that would be seen as a pretty significant miracle.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It was a life-saving miracle.
Yeah. And her miracles really addressed the anxieties and the needs of her community.
Right.
She wasn't just performing these like abstract feats. She was offering tangible solutions to everyday problems.
So beyond restoring breast milk, what else?
Well, she was said to have multiplied bread,
Wow.
healed the plague-stricken,
Oh, wow.
and even,
Wow.
this one might surprise you,
Oh,
raised her own mother from the dead.
she brought her mother back to life.
According to the stories, yes.
That's a pretty extraordinary claim. How do historians reconcile that with, you know?
It's important to remember that we're relying on accounts that were written after Catherine's death.
Right.
So there's always room for embellishment or interpretation.
Right.
But whether literally true or not, these stories had a profound impact on how people perceived her.
Right. It's about the impact
Exactly.
that those stories had on it, people's beliefs and actions.
Yeah, they enhanced her reputation, drew
Right.
followers to her,
Right.
and really solidified her influence. And her influence wasn't just confined to local matters,
Oh, no.
right? Because Italy at this time was,
A patchwork of city-states.
right, all vying for power
Constantly.
and engaging in conflicts.
Exactly.
So into this chaotic mix steps Catherine.
Armed with her reputation for holiness
Right.
and her direct line as she believed to God.
So how did she leverage this influence in the political sphere?
Well, she was far more than just an advisor.
Okay.
She actively engaged in diplomacy,
Really?
traveling between cities, mediating disputes, and even corresponding with the Pope himself.
She wrote to the Pope.
She did.
What did she write about?
Well, remember, the papacy was in Avignon,
Right.
this so-called Babylonian captivity.
Yeah.
And many saw that as a symbol of the church's corruption.
Right.
Catherine, in no uncertain terms, urged Pope Gregory XI to return the papacy to Rome.
So she was calling for like a spiritual renewal.
Exactly, a return to its rightful place.
Wow.
In the heart of Christendom.
She didn't hold back.
No, she didn't.
Did he take her seriously?
He did.
Really?
He actually responded to her letters, even commenting on their intolerably dictatorial tone.
He said that.
He did, but he did say it was sweetened with expressions of her perfect Christian deference.
So he recognized her authority.
Yeah, he did, even if he found her a bit bossy.
A little bit.
Yeah.
And it didn't stop at letters.
No, in 1376, Catherine traveled to Avignon to meet with the Pope in person.
Wow.
And get this.
What?
She was sent as an ambassador on behalf of Florence.
Florence, wasn't that Siena's rival?
It was.
Wow.
Yeah. But that just goes to show the level of respect that she had garnered.
Yeah.
Even her enemies recognized her influence.
Yeah.
And were willing to use it for their own political ends.
So she really transcended those political rivalries.
She did her reputation as a holy woman, a woman who believed she was married to Christ,
Right.
gave her a platform and an authority that few others could dream of.
Yeah.
She was seen as a conduit to God's will,
Right.
and whether people agreed with her views or not, they had to take her seriously.
So what happened after she met with the Pope?
Well, the Pope did return to Rome in 1377,
Really?
an event that many saw as a miracle
Wow.
and attributed to Catherine's influence.
So it seemed like she had succeeded
It seemed so.
through, piety and fasting and letter writing.
Very persuasive letter writing.
But I'm guessing the story doesn't end there.
You're right.
Because,
The church soon found itself embroiled in one of its greatest crises,
which was,
the Great Schism.
right, two popes,
Two popes.
each claiming to be the rightful leader.
That's right.
That's a recipe for disaster.
It was chaos.
So did Catherine stay neutral in all of this?
Catherine was never one to sit on the sidelines.
Yeah.
She firmly aligned herself with the Italian Pope Urban VI.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, she worked so hard to get the papacy back to Rome.
Right.
She wasn't going to be happy with another pope setting up shop in Avignon.
Right. And this wasn't just a theological debate. This had...
Huge political ramifications.
Right.
France naturally supported the French Pope Clement VII,
Right.
while other European powers had to choose sides.
So it was like a religious version of the 100 Years' War
Exactly.
playing out across Europe.
That's a great analogy.
And in this high-stakes game, Catherine's influence became even more crucial.
Absolutely. She was this powerful voice in Urban VI's camp,
Right.
rallying support for his claim and using her spiritual authority to try to discredit Clement VI.
Did she have any success?
Well, she certainly made waves.
Okay.
Urban VI was so impressed by her that he invited her to address a gathering of cardinals.
Wow, the daughter of a tradesman
Yeah.
speaking to cardinals.
It's a pretty powerful image.
What did he make of her?
Well, he clearly respected her, even referring to her as a weak woman who put them all to shame.
Wow.
He recognized her strength and courage, especially in contrast to what he saw as the cowardice of the men around him.
It's interesting how he frames her weakness as a source of strength. It's like her marginalized position as a woman gave her a unique perspective
Yeah, exactly.
and moral authority.
It's a recurring theme in her story.
Right.
This idea that power can be found in unexpected places.
And Catherine certainly wasn't afraid to wield that power.
No, she wasn't. And during this tumultuous period, she actually intensified her fasting,
Really?
reportedly going a whole month without water.
A month without water, that sounds incredibly dangerous.
It was, and it seems to have taken its toll on her already fragile health.
This is where we see the tragic side of Catherine's story,
Unfortunately, yes.
right? Her unwavering commitment to her beliefs,
Yeah.
these intense spiritual practices.
Ultimately leading to her untimely demise.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even those who seem to possess, extraordinary strength and resilience are ultimately human.
Exactly. Even those who strive to transcend the limitations of the physical body are still subject to its vulnerabilities.
So Catherine is in the thick of it, all this political and religious turmoil, the Great Schism. And she's really pushing her body to its limits with this intense fasting.
Right.
Where does her story go from here?
Well, sadly, despite her unwavering spirit, Catherine's health deteriorates rapidly.
Okay.
And she dies in 1380 at the young age of 33.
Wow, that's incredibly young.
Yeah, it really is.
It's a reminder that even those who seem to have extraordinary strength are ultimately human.
Right.
Yeah.
Subject to the limitations of the physical body.
What happens after her death?
Well, even in death, Catherine's story continues.
Okay.
About 50 years later, she's canonized by Pope Pius II,
Damn.
solidifying her legacy as Saint Catherine of Siena.
And Catherine of Siena.
Yeah.
Wow.
Her body was entombed in Rome, a testament to her significance in the church.
Right.
But her head was returned to Siena, where it remains to this day.
Wow.
A revered relic.
What a journey from a, cheerful childhood in Siena to visions of Christ.
Yeah.
A mystical marriage, political intrigue, and ultimately sainthood.
Right.
Catherine of Siena's story is both fascinating and complex.
It really is.
What are your final thoughts on her?
Well, I think Catherine's story really challenges us to consider the power of belief,
Okay.
especially in times of crisis and uncertainty.
Yeah.
Her life shows how faith, even when expressed in unconventional or extreme ways, can be a catalyst for change.
Right.
She also reminds us that power can manifest in unexpected places, even in those considered weak or marginalized by society.
Yeah, I mean, she was a woman operating within a deeply patriarchal system.
Exactly.
And yet she managed to exert influence over popes and kings.
That's remarkable.
It really is.
Right.
But her story also raises questions about, that fine line between faith and fanaticism.
Right.
The dangers of extreme self-denial.
Yeah.
And the interplay between the spiritual and the political.
Absolutely.
Yeah, a lot to think about.
A lot to think about.
If our listeners are intrigued by Catherine of Siena, as we are,
Yeah.
we highly recommend exploring Caroline Walker Bynum's book, Holy Feast and Holy Fast.
Right.
Yeah, it offers a fascinating perspective on the role of food in medieval women's religious lives.
Yeah.
And provides some really valuable insights into Catherine's story.
It's a deep dive into a world that continues to fascinate and challenge our understanding of faith, power, and human nature.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
And until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep diving deep.